The Lord of the Rings Gollum was one of the worst games to release in 2023, and they did everything wrong with this title. They had an amazing IP that they just didn't work with really well. They messed up the most simple video game mechanics, and it's one of the lowest rated pieces of content in general to release this year. And of course, it faced massive backlash after launch. But now we're finding out that the Gollum game apology was actually written by ChatGPT. I have a few different things that I want to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. So I wanted to start off with this VG247 article. It says the Lord of the Rings Gollum apology was allegedly written using ChatGPT without the developer's input. I honestly am not surprised, because after this game released and they had faced so much backlash for it, it seemed like nothing they were doing was good enough, and it really wasn't, right? I mean, this game was so hyped up, and unfortunately, it ended up being a nightmare. It was one of the biggest disappointments for me in years when it comes to video games. I was so hyped for this because, of course, I love Tolkien's work. I love video games. I wanted this to be amazing, and it just failed. The writing was mediocre. The characters around Gollum were just really lackluster. Visually, it looked like crap. And then they messed up the most simple stealth video game mechanics I've ever seen. There have been hundreds of other games that have used these same mechanics, and they just couldn't end up implementing them properly, and overall this game was a nightmare. But now hearing that there's another layer to this story is just, honestly, it's so hilarious to me, because their apology was so generic. It was the same template every other company uses, with the logo at the top, a border around it that matches the game's marketing. I mean, it's something that we've seen happen so many times, and it really makes you wonder how many other companies are using ChatGPT now to put out apologies and press release statements. Like, who needs real humans at this point? Just use AI. It says, according to a recent interview with some former staffers, the apology released for the Lord of the Rings Gollum earlier this year was written by ChatGPT. I didn't think a lot about, I didn't expect to be writing a lot about the Lord of the Rings Gollum again this year, with their development arm being shuttered earlier this year, potentially because of the failure of the game itself. Yes, it does seem like this game failed so terribly. Daedalic decided to, shutter the development arm of their company. They said, we're just going to be publishing games going forward. And it's sad, because I wanted this game to be good. I didn't go into it with a lot of negativity. I was so hyped for it, and I know so many other people were as well. And it was just one of the worst gaming experiences we've had in a long time. On this channel, I stream games, and it is the lowest rated game I have ever streamed. I've never given a video game I've streamed a rating that low. I think I gave it like a 2 or a 2.5. I mean, it was truly just so bad. It says the video from Gaming 2 that spoke with two sources from the company featured an explanation as to why Gollum failed, with one of the major reasons being that the budget was reportedly 15 million euros. To be clear, this is an extremely small amount for a AAA video game. I personally didn't even view this as a AAA video game, and I don't really think many other people did either, because Daedalic really hadn't created that many games. I mean, they over the years have created games, but they were always very small scale projects and indie titles. Yes, it does have the LOTR IP name, so you think that, wow, okay, this could be a AAA, but I didn't go into this thinking it was a competitor to something like, Middle Earth, Shadows of Mordor, and I don't really think other people did either. From the start, they said that this was going to be a stealth experience. It was going to be more of like an interactive story almost, and I just don't think anybody really expected it to be that way, but it also says two sources claim the apology was written with ChatGPT, which is honestly just so funny and so pathetic. It's absolutely wild. And like I mentioned, it is just a very, very generic apology template, as you can see here. I mean, every company comes out with apologies that look almost exactly like this, but a big reason why a lot of people, honestly, months ago, thought that this was probably written by a program was because of this. They spelt the name of the game wrong. They put the Lord of Ring Gollum. I can't even read it with a straight face. The Lord of Ring Gollum. So they're missing and they're missing an S on rings. So we all kind of had a sneaking suspicion that there was something going on here, and hearing the developers say this, it's honestly kind of sad, because the biggest problem is that the developers didn't know, but it still reflects on them and the project. If I was one of these developers, I would be furious. And yes, okay, the game sucked and that was their fault, but this is another controversy that has nothing to do with their skills or lack thereof, and it'll reflect on them forever simply because their name was attached to this project. Overall, the Gollum game was such a disgrace and an embarrassment for the Lord of the Rings brand. And again, I did play it and I gave it some very, very awful scores, but even critics hated it, users hated it. The PlayStation 5 scores on PC, it's a 38, PS5 34, and Xbox 43 for critic, but the user scores a 1.2 user score, and my score for the game honestly wasn't much higher, and the only reason why it got a 2 to a 2.5 is because it's Lord of the Rings, and I did think that it was cool that in the game you could choose between going more in the Smeagol route or the Gollum route. But even the cutscenes, even those dialogue options were the most bizarre things possible. Like, how you got to the end goal was almost a puzzle with no rhyme or reason. It's, I mean, it got absolutely panned garbage, nothing else. The mechanics are clumsy and just bad. The story is boring. The setting is a weird choice considering it's an LOTR game. I don't know how something like this can even happen. Gollum will be the definition of bad game for the next years to come. This is the best game ever made. I've always wanted a game where I could play as Gollum. Gollum's my favorite fictional character. Hey, I wanted a Gollum game, okay? I was totally up for the premise of this title. This game is the most buggy game I saw for the past 10 years. I'm not going to sit here and describe every poor example of the game that happened to me, but the most notable was right before you get into the final cutscene. Okay, there are a bunch of spinning platforms and you have to climb the platforms while they're spinning, while there's enemies shooting at you, and at the very top of this pillar platform you have to jump. Okay, you have to jump and you have to activate a button. And as I jumped and right before I activated the button, the game crashed. And it took me a half hour to get back to that spot, and that was the very end of the game. I mean, this title had nothing going for it. It is just one of the worst video games I've personally ever played. It was buggy, it was broken, it was mediocre, overall just not a good experience. It's no real surprise to see why it failed, and it's not even that surprising to hear now that the apology was written by ChatGPT. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.